Welcome to Fulhamish's match preview before this weekend's big game against Liverpool. And I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Neil Atkinson of the mighty Anfield Wrap. Neil, thank you so much for joining me.
It's an absolute pleasure, Jack. It's always great. I was made up you just came up, to be honest with you, just for this moment. This is what I was in it for in that playoff final.
It's it was us or Billy the Bee, so you had a flip off there. I'm glad we all got the right decision made. Huge game, obviously, for us at the weekend. It's one of those things where we've had a tough run of fixtures. Obviously, we had Everton, then Leicester, then Man City, and then you guys. I don't think anyone was expecting to get much out of this, but we thought if the points were going to come, they were going to come against Everton. Obviously, when that didn't happen, those three games, Leicester, City, Liverpool, felt a bit difficult, and suddenly we had 3 points out of the Leicester game. So I think everyone's kind of buoyant about the fact that we've got, even if we take nothing out of this, it's a point a game against Leicester, City, Liverpool. You'd be taking that all day long. What's it like from a Liverpool perspective? Because there's a sense that things have kind of settled since like the big good defeat to Villa, and now it feels like things are just rolling in the right direction again for you guys.
I think that's really fair. We've got out the Champions League group with a game to spare, so we were able to rest a few for the game against Midtjylland. We still took everyone, which is interesting. I think he wants that sort of feeling of togetherness and his squad. He didn't want to do a ton of kids, but most of them got a rest. Salah got the full match. But I do think that there's somewhere within the Liverpool psyche where we do feel a little bit like we've got out of a bad patch. And when you want to talk about sort of tough runs of games, we've played everyone directly around us with the exception of Tottenham and Manchester United. Everyone else, so far we've played, we've had Leicester, we've gone to Goodison, we had the Villa Park sort of debacle within there as well. We've been to Stamford Bridge really early in the season. We've even faced Leeds so far who've, impressed people to an extent. So I'm feeling at least relatively buoyant, to be honest with you. I feel as though it's very possible we've had our bad patch, which, just is a remarkable thing to say when you look at where we are, joint top, and as I say, out of the Champions League group. But it's very possible that is the case, that Liverpool have had the toughest run of the seasons in terms of both injuries and also games and outcomes from those games. And now we can just sort of look at what we found ourselves doing last season and the season before, which is going into games pretty confident that we're going to put in a performance at the very least, but also follow that up with the points.
You mentioned the injuries there, and I suppose that's the kind of main talking point from where we're looking at it and seeing who's going to be missing. The question, I suppose, on everyone's lips is Alisson, right? And Caoimhin Kelleher has done absolutely beautifully. And obviously, as an Ireland fan, I'm delighted that you've unearthed the new Shay Given. But on a kind of personal capacity as a Fulham fan, I kind of hope he's in net this weekend as well, because we saw he's had two kind of reasonable, unflappable games, and then yesterday caught out a little bit in the Midtjylland game. Not completely his fault, as you kind of point out, but it was one of those things you're like, okay, you can get to him. He is obviously still a kid. He has something, and Alisson's brought so much to this side, obviously, in terms of what it's been for this team.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what the manager does, because I think the way his philosophy is going to be about now players returning from injury is I don't think he's going to rush anyone, because he can see that we'd obviously still want to be in this season actively right the way through until May. The one thing I think he's not going to want to do, and what Liverpool have been really good at, not just across the last season or so, but I'd say across the last sort of 4 or 5, is I think they're really good at policy decisions and then sticking to them. So if we've decided we're not rushing anyone back, then we're not rushing anyone back. It's that straightforward. And I think that therefore, if Alisson isn't quite right, then I don't think he'd be rushed back. The flip side is I suspect he could have played against Midtjylland. He may even been able to play the weekend before. That could have been last weekend's conversation. This weekend, he might just be ready and ready to go from a Liverpool point of view. That said, Kelleher's done perfectly well. I think that the priority for Liverpool will be having Alisson for the game against Tottenham. I think they won't want Kelleher in that environment in what will be a massive match. So if there's any doubt whatsoever around Alisson, then I suspect they will stick with Kelleher. That'll be the attitude and the outlook. But I just sort of think that might have been last weekend's conversation, and this weekend, Becker might just be ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a couple more. We're obviously not going to see VVD back or anything like that, but Thiago's been sort of here and there, and James Milner obviously with a hamstring injury that no one's completely and utterly sure about. How long it's going to take and all those things. And again, Milner's not someone you want to be rushing back at his age and all these things. So there's an element of this that's a little bit kind of. Is he going to bother pushing these players back if they're not fit for Fulham, like you say?
I don't think we're seeing Thiago now till January. I think it'll be as straightforward as it'll almost, again, I think they like to clarify their own decision-making processes. So I think it wouldn't surprise me if they've had a conversation around Thiago. Someone said we could get him back for mid-December, and they thought, no, we never had a pre-season. Let's just get him, make sure that when we get him back, we've got him for 5 months.
Yeah.
And that's what I think they'll have done. Milner, similar. I think that it's almost like in the manager's mind, he just wants to be able to say, well, I haven't even got to think about that. That one's gone. And I think that Milner won't make the weekend. And I suspect we'd like him back for the Christmas period, to be quite honest with you, where it's, the 3 games quite back to back. I think they'd like the option of Milner to start one of them and be on the bench for a couple. So I think Liverpool are picking from a relatively small pool of players for this game coming up. I think I can, I'm quite confident I can say, well, the centre-half partnership will be Matip and Fabinho. Yeah. Robertson will start left back. Henderson and Wijnaldum will both play. Mane and Firmino will both start, as neither of them started against Midtjylland. It wouldn't surprise me if Mo Salah starts from the bench. I haven't done the full run of the game against Midtjylland, and I think that the priority again will be the Spurs game. So Salah will definitely obviously start the Tottenham game. And then it'll be Warner Jones and Keita in the middle of the park to go with Henderson and Wijnaldum. One of Salah and Jota, as I say. I think it might just be Jota, because I don't think Jota will start Tottenham. And then the big one from a sort of a weakness point of view, I think from a Fulham perspective, is I think he will start Nico Williams at right back and look to give him an hour, and then give Trent another half an hour to get Trent ready for Tottenham. And Nico does really, really well last couple of games he's played against Ajax and then last weekend against Wolves. So I'm not saying he's like some sort of glaring weak link, but if you've got to pick one full back to attack, you're there on the young lad who's 19, who hasn't got 15 first-team appearances, over Andy Robertson.
Yeah, and that's going to be where you'd imagine for Fulham that Ademola Lookman will play, and we'll look to attack that flank. And being our probably most creative spark, you look at that Fulham perspective and go, okay, maybe that's the ball. And it's been interesting because we've seen him do bits and bobs in the season so far, and has been that creative spark. But against Leicester, it was very much the other side. It was Christian Fuchs who was targeted, Bobby Reed over there, and Ivan Cavallero trying to get off that shoulder. So I think Parker has started to identify weaknesses and try and attack them, and that's something that we haven't seen necessarily from a Fulham perspective in quite a while.
Yeah, I think that's something which, I mean, we've been dealing with this for a while. When we have a full strength back four, people attack Alexander-Arnold / Gomez's side over Van Dijk and Robertson's side, mostly because of Van Dijk. You sort of leave Van Dijk alone and you try to go the other way. The one thing I'd say is, from a Fulham perspective, I'd watch the Liverpool 1-2 on this. Leicester came to Anfield and we had Milner at right back, and they poured everything down the left. And we said, great, we'll play from our right then. And Milner ran the game from right back when he was meant to be the weak link. And then from there, Liverpool had another midfielder in front of him. And then they had Salah on the right-hand side. And I think what we're quite good at is and have been good at for a while, is sort of saying, if you think you're attacking our weakest point, watch us actually flip that. And suddenly so Henderson will pull and play really on the right-hand side, and suddenly Henderson's everywhere, and everyone's going, why is Henderson so involved in this game? We're trying to play to our strengths. And I think it's something Liverpool have been really good at for a while, is taking what looks like this is the place to get at us and flipping it and saying, well, actually, now we're going to run the game from this area. And look, there's now Andy Robertson and Sadio Mane have got loads of space because you put all your players on this side. And I think it's something which, as I say, it's something that I would watch out for from a Fulham perspective. I think the best way to sort of go at Liverpool on the whole is to try to be really quite holistic and think, try not to think about weak links, and instead just sort of say what suits us, where can we find the most joy, and allow the game to sort of come at you. It's a really easy thing to say. Managers love game plans and footballers love game plans. But I think sort of seeing how a game develops a little bit against Liverpool is what sides don't seem to do. And the other thing, I think, in general in football anyway, I've noticed recently, Wan-Bissaka's getting a lot of grief for United. And I think part of what's happened is that sides have started to actively attack him. Not act like he's a really good defender and we'll stay away from him, but actively go at him, discombobulate him, and then you knock the whole shape of that United side out. And I think at times, I've always felt the best way to get at some teams is to actually go with the strongest link, hurt the strongest link, and then watch the whole side go, hang on, we can normally rely on that fella. Sides who, for instance, get about Wijnaldum make it hard for us because we rely on Wijnaldum to be really press resistant and to look after the ball for us. And then if we can't do that, we can be got at a little bit, I think. If that option's taken away from us because you've gone at the strongest bit of our team in terms of looking after that, we do suddenly go, well, hang on, that's a new problem. We haven't solved that one before.
Yeah, and that battle in the middle will be interesting because Andre Frank Zambo has been our best player, I'd suggest, this season by some distance, and has, seems to step up his game against the big teams. We saw, against City, that kind of whirlwind turn in the first minute to get himself out of trouble, and I think that he's not shop windowing himself, because I think that's too harsh, but he is very much kind of like, I belong here, and is still making a statement to say I'm very capable in this league, and I think that's interesting.
I think it's really interesting, but I think he also responds well when the game goes fast. And I think because I think he can play at that pace. And I think that one of the things that I think happens to sides that come up or back into the Premier League, as is the case for Fulham, is it is that shock of suddenly these games can go really, really quickly. And I actually think that Anguissa is more than capable of matching that pace. It's a really interesting little thing that I think he rises to that pace, whereas a few other players of all the sides that come up or have been up even for a season, I think Sheffield United have really struggled this season when the pace of a game shifted. Whereas last season, I think they were able to hang on to the coattails of that and ride those periods out. This season, they've been swamped when that's happened. Yeah. But Anguissa looks as though he wants to play that fast to me. Like, come on. Why can't it always be this quick? And I think that that's something which is really interesting. And shop window is, it isn't the right sort of way to think about it, but to demonstrate you can belong at a class or a level. I think, for instance, Basuma is such a clever player and such a quick player at the heart of the Brighton midfield. I think there's a few players knocking around the Premier League at the minute who are playing in sides who we expect to finish in the bottom half, who are able to say, but when your side comes to our ground and you play at your pace, look, I can live with it. And I think it's a really, really interesting thing. And I think it is almost the thing that defines players at the minute in terms of where the ceiling is how they deal with it when the game goes quick.
Now, just before we finish this off, I'd be really intrigued as to your take on Fulham this season, because it's been a strange old start. And then it's sort of settled down a bit. We talked about that, about Liverpool settling out of their rocky patch, or Fulham's rocky patch was dark, right? But we settled a little bit.
I honestly thought you weren't going to win a game. First 3 or 4, I thought, oh my God. It was one of them. We've started to do some fantasy football stuff this year on the Anfield Wrap, and genuinely on about week 3, I put a thing in my phone to remind me to do the free hit thing and triple captain Man City players when Fulham were playing Man City. And that came up on my phone, and I decided against it because I thought this is actually a Fulham side that have settled. And Parker himself, what I think he deserves enormous credit for is that he's changed minds, both externally, but I think internally, and he's changed his own mind. So I think he's got a mentality now within that side. Like, I think, listen, I'll take any win at Fulham, and I'd always take any win in any game, but I don't think there'll be more than 2 goals in this at the end. I do think Liverpool will win, but I don't think we'll win by more than 2. I don't think we're going there and we're going to be talking 3s, 4s, 5s. I'd take what Manchester City got, a tight 2-0 and we get out, because I think that's where Fulham have ended up now. And they look more than capable of hurting you on the break. And a lot of the established players, he's been happy now for at least a period, sideline. So he's changed his own mind about some of his own players. He's changed the minds of those players, I think, and improved that mentality and got them feeling like they're in games and they can live in games. And I think that that's so important. I think there isn't a game now for the rest of this season. Listen, there'll be an anomaly somewhere where Fulham will just have a bad day. But I think Fulham will feel like they're in every game for most of the game, every time they take to the pitch now. And that didn't look like it was going to be the case, first 3 or 4. And I'm looking at this one at the weekend, and I think it's potentially really sticky for Liverpool. You just get in and get out with anything you can. I think if we start fast, we can get a lead. I think it's taken... The one thing I think that Parker's still got to deal with is I still feel like Fulham are a little vulnerable first 15. And then they suddenly go, hang on, we can do this. And then you see them grow. But if you're 1-0 down and you decide that's not great, if you're 2-0 down and you realise that you can actually go at this level and the worst thing that can happen has happened, then that's not great either. But for me, I think that Fulham are in with a great shout now of staying up. And as I say, after 3 or 4 games, I'd have said the absolute opposite. But I do think that for the first time, I do feel a little bit like, I think Fulham can stay up. I don't think they will. I think West Brom can stay up. Sorry, I do think Fulham will. I think West Brom can stay up. I don't think they will. I think one of Fulham and West Brom might end up in a position where they can stay up. And I think Fulham look better than West Brom.
Well, we'll take them all at this point. As we said at the start of the season, 17th on goal difference will bite your hand off. For. So well, thank you so much, Neil, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure as always.
Oh, it's been terrific, and just great to see everything going well.
Thank you, mate. And obviously, for all your Liverpool content, the Anfield Wrap is the place to be, as ever. Cheers, Neil. Take care now. Good luck.
Take it easy.
Bye.